And welcome back to The Big Question. We're discussing, as said previously, Citizen Khan, is it a mockery or is it a comedy? We're delighted this evening to be joined by the producer and journalist Sakina Datoo. Sakina Datoo, previously you were saying that you took offence to the fact that the sitcom was racist or suggested racism.
I wouldn't say I took offence as such. What I found very concerning was the way that was portrayed. Right. Because I do believe that racism exists in our cultures, in our communities. The very fact that within the Muslim community, all of us, you know, from different cultures, we are so far apart. We're not able to come to one mosque and pray. We're not able to intermarry. We're not able to even, seriously have any kind of community gatherings. There is definitely racism, but not in the context it was shown over there. For example,
what was the context? Yeah,
I think the context was, for example, you wouldn't accept authority from a convert. And my concern is because this is being watched by, in an atmosphere which is not obviously Muslim, it is being watched on the mainstream by everybody. We don't want to be giving out bad messages because in this country, or at the moment, there is a lot of Islamophobia. In Europe, but also in this country, there is still quite significant Islamophobia. So you don't want it to be portrayed that we are complaining about being targeted and then we are targeting others, because we don't target others in that context.
All right, well, again, we welcome your calls. Are you a convert or a revert? Did you find this particular clip offensive, or as Sakina Datoo put it, concerning? 0203 4117 842. Let me just pick you up on that point. You said it sent bad messages. But this does happen, Sakina Datoo. There is an inferiority complex that Muslims have when it comes to converts. I mean, I remember I've been involved in sort of community affairs for a very long time. I remember when one person actually came up to me, reflecting on a view from someone who was a revert, saying, well, they're not really originally Muslim, are they? They're not like us. We're Muslim. They're reverts, so they can't be as sincere. I mean, this is a genuine depiction. It goes on in our community. Now, the fact that Muslims are ashamed of it and don't want the whole world knowing about it, surely that's not a very valid reason to criticize the sitcom.
I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not aware, but my assessment is that it's a very small section of the community that holds that view. I do agree that racism is very strong when it comes to, for example, marriage. When it comes to marriage, we are very, very racist.
Do you not feel that converts are treated differently?
They are treated differently in context of our family gatherings, as in, if you want your daughter to get married to a revert, it's a big issue. But I think in the context of, for example, mosque, sitting together, or how we greet each other, I think there is a very positive attitude. In my view, what I've seen is that when I see, or when I have seen others react to reverts, I think that they feel very warm about the idea that somebody is coming to Islam.
Do you think you're being naive?
No, I don't think so. I think there is a small section of community that is so racist that even acknowledging someone, speaking to them is a problem when they are not from the revert community.
There are a lot of reverts we've discussed on this show, other shows where individuals say, they even walk into a meat shop and Muslims may not respond to their salam, or may not even say salam, and there's someone else who's should we say, a born Muslim, and they'll respond to them and say salamu alaikum. I mean, do you not agree, Sakina Datoo, that there is an inherent problem in our community when it comes to accepting reverts into our fold? And it was an extreme example, I'll give you that, but does it not bring a problem to the fore?
It does bring a problem, but I think first of all, my concern is that, it is a problem, but it is something that we should be discussing within our boundaries, because it is a problem that we need to find a solution to. What you don't want to happen is for others to come up and say, we are complaining about being targeted, because it's very real. Islamophobia is also very real. And now you are doing the same thing. And I don't think, if you compare the extent of the problem, I don't think it is equal.
But do you feel it was portrayed as, I suppose a counter-argument to that would be that in the sitcom, it was by no means on the same scale as what Muslims face when it comes to Islamophobia. I mean, it was a sitcom, and that's the fact. It was a sitcom.
It was meant to be exaggerated, obviously. Yeah.
So therefore, do you not feel that individuals that did find this offensive, rather than being offensive, should look at it as a productive way of presenting a real problem and bringing it out into the public so that it can be adequately addressed? Because a lot of us will say, racism and all the rest of it, but
no, like I said, I don't think that it was offensive. I never found it offensive, because it is real, it does happen, but I am concerned about the consequences of that portrayal when it is, you see, what we have to constantly remember is who is the audience for all this. Even when we are complaining, for example, earlier about how, you know, Quran is being portrayed, how namaz is being portrayed, we have to constantly remind ourselves that it is not the Muslims who are watching this alone. If it was within our context, we would portray it in a very different manner. But this is a mainstream media. This is being watched by anybody and everybody. So that is where my concern is, that there are a lot of issues we should be raising. And yes, racism is a problem within our communities. We should be raising it. But I personally still don't think that in that context of one-on-one social gathering, maybe I am naive, but I personally feel that in that context, it is not such a major issue.
Was it not positive by the very fact that you've got a chap called Dave, who's a revert, who's actually been elevated to the position of mosque manager?
Absolutely.
That in itself is a sense of very positive message. That
is a very positive message, and we have to really wait to see where the sitcom is going, what really is going to be the message. If going further, we see that this, Mr. Khan's family actually realizes that what they're doing is not correct and stuff, which I believe will be the line taken, then maybe it will be positive.
Dave comes across as a pretty sincere chap.
Yes.
I mean, yesterday when you look in the show, sorry, on Monday, when he's referring to the elderly, he was sort of saying, you know, in Islam we need to look after our elderly and care for elderly and all the rest of it. So that was
I mean, honestly, the whole concept
of
reverts, there is not even, why should we even be discussing? These people are Muslims like anyone else, and Muslims are all equal. There is no one who has, like copyright on the fact that we were born Muslims. Therefore, I think, personally, I think people who are revert to Islam are more real Muslims than a lot of us who practice traditional Islam simply because we were born in it. So there is no way of justifying that, you know, we treat them any less. In fact, I think they are better off. They have come to Islam having understood what Islam is.
We had a discussion. Let me go back to the issue of the girl reading the Quran, and there was another point during the documentary where she's about to go out and she says, well, I'm going shopping, and the father says, well, where are you going? You know, who are you going shopping with? And she goes, oh, I'm going shopping for mum. And he goes, oh, this is a good girl and all the rest of it. But obviously she was going elsewhere, so she leaves the house and she immediately takes her hijab off, and many thought that was a mockery of the hijab. It belittled the status of the hijab. But what's your view?
My view, first of all, is that if we, for a minute, just put aside the whole concept of it being, offensive to Islam, I just think it's such an outdated line. You know, I just think the whole comedy, to be honest, is so 70s. You know, I mean, it is the only positive thing in my view is the fact that because there is a vacuum, there is no space where Asians and Muslims are portrayed in that context of sitcoms in this country. I think it's a positive thing. But the fact that it is such, this is an opportunity that could have been utilized in such a better manner, because there are so many other issues in our societies today. So, if you look at that family, that is not how people are today. Ideal Pakistani community, society or family doesn't act like that anymore.
So did you find that offensive? Did you find it was
I didn't find it offensive. I just thought it was outdated, because today, in my view, what I believe is there are a lot of women who don't cover, but they don't need to. They are not scared of their parents in that context to be able to play those double standards.
But yet, one would argue that it does happen, and perhaps you're just looking at things from a very sort of. So I wouldn't say narrow-minded, but a micro sort of perspective, whereas these are very real issues that are being brought to the fore, and perhaps we ought to be addressing them as opposed to denying that these things even exist.
I think the situation is worse than that. I think it is still better when somebody is scared, at least showing that they feel sensitive about the fact that, you know, they are not in hijab, so they feel like they have to be scared of their parents. The reality today is most women, a lot of women, who are not practicing Muslim women are not even fearful. They will leave the house.
Let's take a call. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Thank you for calling. Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make a general comment without going into detail of the show. I watched it partially, and I do not remember the whole scenes.
Right.
I'm slightly surprised to listen some criticism, with regard to particular scenes or dialogues. I think we need to look at as a comedy, a fiction. And you know that there is another program which was shown last week on Channel 4, Islam Untold Story.
Yeah.
And that has also drawn a lot of criticism. So I think that this will send a quite negative message sister was saying that this is going to be seen by the mainstream public, and they would somehow take a negative view. I think that the reaction that you are generating, or some people are generating, will result into negative message. And people will say, I mean, mainstream people will say that, look at, if a scholarly documentary like Channel 4's Islam, The Untold Story is shown, people get angry and they start making fuss about that. And when there is a comedy and there is a fiction, the people do the same. So I think that people need to be, or we need to be more generous and learn how to laugh at ourselves. And I think some things which are being shown and which are being criticized are generally quite common in ourselves. I mean, we have people who have lived in this society for some time. They have come across this kind of behavior and this kind of things. Of course, some exaggeration is applied in the fiction, but I think we need to be generally try to appreciate that.
I mean, let me put this question to you. In fact, let's just very briefly bring Sakina Datoo, and then I do have a question for you. Sakina, what's your view on what the gentleman is saying?
I think I said this before also. I think I do agree to a large extent that, you know, this is an opportunity. There was a vacuum for something like this, and therefore we should not take it too sensitively, take a bit of a chill pill. But having said that, if there are issues, we should raise them in a polite manner. We don't have to go out and say we are offended, but we can say we are concerned about these issues, because you want the message to reach them, to say that, look, these things were not really, they didn't sit very well with this community. So, you know, you need to be aware, you need to be cautious how you address this particular community.
I just ask you a question, and let me take a very extreme example, because since you presented the argument that it's a comedy. So if there was a homosexual male in the sitcom, and this was somehow, and Mr. Khan got irritated, and there was a bit of controversy concerning that, would you still feel that it's a sitcom, it's a comedy, and therefore we should not get so hung up over it?
Right. I have nothing to comment about that particular scenario, but I would say, can you continue?
Yes, so that's my point though. So the argument is that is what these sort of comedies pave the way for. That unless you actually draw the line, unless you actually make clear that this is appropriate and this is not appropriate, the next phase is getting to the scenario that I just quoted, and you don't really want to comment on it, which would suggest.
Right. Okay. If you want if you insist, then I can say that in real life, does this kind of scenario come up? I think it does. And people do discuss those kind of scenarios in private lives and collectively. So why not show it, on air? And I don't agree with the city when they say that it has to be tackled, privately and differently. That's the issue. I think that people who get, scared of Islam is because they think that they have double face. They have two different story to tell. Sure. One privately and one
a very very valid point there, and thank you very much indeed for your call. And that's why Sakina Datoo, the brother, puts it quite aptly. I mean, this is an argument that you were using in relation to
I think there is every community that decides certain things, we can discuss them, and it is not about Muslims having double face. I think the very fact that the whole Western media has a double face more than any other media in the world, and therefore that portrays from everything, from news, the way news is portrayed, to their own sitcoms, to how their culture is portrayed in other countries. So I don't think it's fair to say that Muslims have double standards. I think every community wants to address certain issues in public to show what they are, and certain issues within. The reason for that is not because we're scared, not because we are denying it, but because we think this is a problem which will there will be better solution if we address it within ourselves. So for example, channel like this one should be addressing issues of racism, because you know that your audience is majority people who have this problem. But we don't want to go out and discuss these things in mainstream media. Already there is such a negative portrayal of Muslims in the mainstream media. So I would say, yeah, I'm concerned. From all the positive things that Muslims have, why are we discussing racism at this stage? Later on, yes, but there's so many other components we should be raising in the first 2-3 episodes.
It's a sitcom, it's not a documentary. And I think that's the point, isn't it? I mean, the way you're responding will suggest that you think it's a documentary. It's a sitcom. No. It's an opportunity to have a laugh, have a joke, enjoy. I mean, you can't deal with all the serious issues in a sitcom.
But it's exactly what you asked the brother before. You know, if you're just laughing about it and not concerned about the limits, we will reach to a scenario.
Where are the limits? I mean, okay, fair enough. There was a revert, and he was treated in a derogatory manner. I mean, that surely, I mean, for
like
someone
I said,
to start getting all hung up over that,
I wouldn't say hung up. Like I said, it's not offensive. I am concerned about where that is going and what implications that will have.
All right. What else did you find, shall we say, concerning about the documentary?
More than
the comedy.
The comedy. I think there was this scene in the toilet where Mr. Khan is getting stuck with a woman. I just found it very distasteful. I wouldn't say offended, but I think, you know, it's the kind of things. I think they're missing the point. There's such a lot of comedy. For example, one scenario I can think about in our lives today here is a modern woman, you know, and the confusion you have between trying to keep up with traditional ways of running a house, a family in the way that is expected, and a modern woman at the same time who is out working, doing, you know, having apparently become quite westernized in her approach. How does this woman manage the two roles?
All right, well, let's take a call, and perhaps we'll be able to answer that question as well. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Thank you for calling in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to comment on the brother who called just. I want to tell you that we must be discussing Channel 4's documentary rather than the Mr. Khan, which is purely a comedy, which is not true.
Can we not discuss both? Is there a problem with discussing both?
No, I think at the moment we have got more responsibility to discuss the documentary rather than this comedy series. This is a fiction. Everybody knows it's a fiction, not the reality. But what Channel 4 is showing, that's more documented. I think you must be discussing that rather than this. That's more. We are outlined with Channel 4, not with this.
Sure. But okay, just stay on the line. Let's just bring Sakina Datoo in. Stay on the line. Let's just bring Sakina Datoo in, and then we'll carry on.
I think there is room to discuss both issues, because I think documentary is a serious issue and needs to be addressed in a very serious manner. But I think the sitcom, what we have to understand is the audience that was watching this, and you know, people influenced by sitcoms are a lot more, because in a lighter way the messages are a lot stronger. A lot of people would not sit down and watch serious programs, but sitcom, everybody laughs at it, and a lot of people who've probably never had any first-hand connections to Muslims would find this way of knowing about us. So I think we should be sensitive, and we should be discussing these issues, but again, we should not become oversensitive. We should be able to laugh at ourselves, but with concerns.
I suppose, I mean, just very briefly, since this documentary has come up twice now, I mean, the documentary is something untold story. I mean, the arguments that were presented in that documentary were nothing new. I mean, these are the ideas of Patricia Crone, who's a scholar, and she's written a book, and there's Hagarism, which was a theory that existed maybe back in the 70s that was dismissed a long time ago, and all he's done is picked up this theory of Patricia Crone and he's depicted it in the form of a documentary and suggested that it was somehow unique. I mean, do you feel that we're somehow, maybe due to our own ignorance, getting a bit hung up over this? Because the theory of Patricia Crone and Hagarism has actually, and I hope it's pronounced that way, has been refuted. I mean, it's been refuted several times, and that's what this documentary,
you know, what they said to you is, if you lie often enough, even you yourself believe the lie. So whenever there is anything like that being portrayed, I think it is only right for us to stand up and say, no, this is not acceptable. We should not become militant, you know, but there are ways to protest things, to discuss it and say, no, this is not on. And I think there's a lot of statement from a lot of Muslim organizations who have actually come up and explained it very, very well. So I think that was fair enough, and I think media in its own part, Islamic media, has also done its job. But
should Channel 4 have aired that documentary?
Sorry?
Should they have aired
it should not have.
Why not?
Because it is, like you said, it's disproven. I do believe that it is offensive, and it's something that has been disproven. So, you know, why persist a line?
You feel it was presented as fact?
It was a documentary, so it was sort of, you know, presented as a fact. And I think, yeah, I think it's a lot more serious issue that needs to be discussed, you know, with, like you said, you know, proofs have been, you have to present proofs and try to, for someone who has watched it for the first time, it's not necessary that just because it was, you know, everybody knows that it's not true. But I think it has its role. I think we should be discussing. I definitely think anything.
Should we be discussing one over the other?
No, I think both have a room. I think Islamic media, the very reason why Islamic media exists is to fill the vacuum and discuss all these issues, and they touch us in different ways. And to be honest, I don't know how many people have watched the documentary, but everybody I've spoken to seems to have a view on Citizen Khan. So obviously it is coming into our homes, you know, thick and fast, and we're watching it, and we have concerns, and I think it's only fairly that we should be addressing them.
Do you feel that, to all intents and purposes, that it did the Citizen Khan, because when you look at the Islam, the Untold Story, not everyone, number one, is going to watch it, and number two, that people that do watch it probably get pretty baffled and think, I don't even understand this, and they may not pass judgment. But what Citizen Khan did was actually, in my view, humanize Muslims, and it just showed different elements of Muslim life, and it sort of took away, you know, we as you quite rightly pointed out, you've got Islamophobia, you've got terrorism, you've got all the other negative connotations that were sort of presented. I'm not saying these specific issues were presented, but generally Muslims, in my view, were actually presented in a human light. That way, human
absolutely, and I think it's a very positive thing, and I don't believe in any way that BBC had an agenda against Muslims in this one. I don't think so at all. I think they wanted to portray a growing part of this country, society that exists, and it's obvious, you know. That's why I'm saying we should not be offended, but if we have concerns, so that future programs take into concern what our concerns are, we should be raising these issues. But I think there definitely was a vacuum, and although I don't really find it that funny, I will still sit down and watch it for the very reason that there is nothing else that sort of reflects me, even though it doesn't reflect me completely. It's somehow, you know, I can see people like me there, I can see, you know, things I believe in being portrayed there, so there is room for it, and therefore I watch it, even though I don't really think it's a great comedy, but it definitely was a positive thing. But we should raise things that concern us.
Do you feel that it mocked, what did it mock more in your view, if indeed it mocked anything at all? But what concerned you more? Was it the Islamic cultural side of things, or the Pakistani culture? And one would argue that some of the documentary was a little bit, well, racist, if you like. Well, let's use the word derogatory. For example, the plastic over the couches and the plastic screen over the light switch and such like. I mean, do you think that's just
that's what I meant when I said it's so 70s, you know, and I think it mocks a little more of the culture than Islam. I think despite the fact that we are pointing out things that we think were of concern to Muslims, I think they have put in a lot of efforts to ensure that they were not very offensive to Muslims. It's written by a Muslim, you know. It's and I think they were. I would think that they were very concerned about what. It's just the viewpoint, you know. Even within our own, even within the callers we've had, some people just say, you know, there's nothing offensive. Let's just laugh at it. Some people find it totally offensive, and some people are in between, like we are. So I think it's very subjective, and for people who are not Muslims, who are not Asians, who producers who are sitting there, I think they didn't have any intention to offend Muslims, and therefore I think, you know, that there was a little more of the mockery of the Pakistani culture, which I don't really think Pakistanis living today in Britain are like that, to be honest.
Sakina Datoo, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You've been watching The Big Question live on Ahlulbayt TV. Thank you once again to our guests and all those that called in. As ever, you can share your views on the show. You can email tbq@ahlulbayt.tv. You can also tweet at Ahlulbayt.tv and share your views on Facebook. Thank you again for watching. We shall see you at the same time next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.